So should I go ahead, Jim?
Just 1 second.
Okay.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Brown Bag webinar. This is Jim Loughran speaking. We've got a really great session for today. We are going to have Stéphane Larocque from Impact Infrastructure, and we're going to hear a case study from Lydia Berger, and really talking about and going through the product Autocase and making that case for sustainable design. Really excited to have Stéphane and Lydia here with us. This is really a continuing series that we're running of webinars on sustainable return on investment. And this is the second in the series. We do have one more coming up in January, so please mark your calendars for that. So before we get going, I want to go through a few housekeeping items. This is a live session. However, all of you in attendance are on mute, and so we do want to try to make it as interactive as possible. So if you do have questions, please use the chat feature. It should be in the little GoToWebinar bar that pops up on your screen, typically on the right-hand side, and at the bottom there's the chat window. And if you chat, when you're doing your chat, if you select send the message to staff, then that gets into the question window, and we'll leave about 10 to 15 minutes at the end to try to get all your questions asked and answered. But also I want to let people know that we are recording this session, and we do make these recordings available after the fact, including the Q&A. So if you can't stay for the entire session, please come back and take a look at that recording when you get a chance. So with that, I want to hand it over to Steph and to Lydia, and we'll get going.
Hey, thanks, Jim. This is Stéphane Larocque as the first speaker, and Lydia will do her segment about halfway through the presentation today. So I'm going to start off by providing an introduction to what we are talking about when we talk about Autocase. For starters, that acronym really stands for Automated Business Case, is really what we're trying to do, which is automating the cost-benefit analysis or benefit-cost analysis, or S-ROI, which is sustainable return on investment that Jim just talked about earlier. In other words, best practice in economics that considers the triple bottom line, which is environmental, social, and financial factors, all considered as part of the business case. This is a software suite. It's in our case, produced by Impact Infrastructure, that has specific modules, one right now for buildings, another one for green infrastructure, and we will add additional modules, and you'll certainly learn a lot more about that as we go through it. Why did we develop this? Well, our company is really founded by consultants who did this for a living prior to creating the company Impact Infrastructure, and we used to produce business cases based on billable hours as consultants on a one-off basis. And countless clients asked us, don't you have a software that can do this for us? And obviously, as you know, the last couple of decades in particular, software has really replaced a lot of manual effort in all kinds of areas, including AutoCAD for computer-aided design as an example. And you know, why not automate cost-benefit analysis, or S-ROI? So that's really why we decided to create Autocase. In terms of how does it work, well, I'll demo both modules, the one for buildings, the one for green infrastructure today, and we'll go through some case studies as well. Before I get there, though, I do want to make sure that people are aware of some terms, some key terms here. One of them is triple bottom line. That's a term that probably a fair number of people know. More and more people for sure, but that really means that we are considering environmental and social factors right alongside financial factors when making decisions. So instead of just considering things like improved water quality or improved productivity or improved health or reduction in greenhouse gases as a sort of qualitative add-on to a business case, it's really considered on par with the financial terms when you're talking about a triple bottom line. In terms of benefit cost analysis or cost benefit analysis, they can be considered triple bottom line analyses, and they're really even more well-known terms. They've been used fairly extensively since the 60s. Federal government in the U.S. requires it for, a lot of different capital projects. And by the way, they are synonymous. So it's just two different ways of saying the same thing. But it does include putting dollar values on externalities like water quality or saving water or greenhouse gases or air pollution as examples. And really, when we talk about S-ROI, which we had a whole other webinar earlier last month, really it's best practice in all these things is what sustainable return on investment really is. So another way of looking at this triple bottom line BCA framework, you do still consider the financial impact. And Autocase does produce life cycle cost financial impacts of your project. But in addition, when to consider a triple bottom line, you have to put dollar values on a bunch of these other things that I've talked about before, and you can see on the screen right now. The software does put dollar values on all these things and many more elements as well. So if we go to the next slide, a logical question we often get is, how do you put dollar values on these things? Well, we don't at Impact Infrastructure produce for the software any of our own specific values. On a consulting basis, which we still do for things that can't be done by the software, there are instances where we do provide an environmental or social value, but for the software, it's all based on guidance, primarily from the U.S. federal government, best practice guidance on how to value different environmental and social factors. Lots of different ways that those are valued, contingent valuation, willingness to pay, et cetera. But we're not doing the first research. We're taking someone else's peer-reviewed and widely used research for those valuations. An example, and one that a lot of people talk about all the time, is carbon. So for instance, the U.S. federal government, large departments have gotten together. They first did that in 2010, called the Interagency Working Group on the Social Cost of Carbon. And they have updated the number 3 times since 2010. But essentially, they provide a dollar value to be used when monetizing the social value of an incremental ton of carbon dioxide produced or saved. So in other words, if you're, say, photovoltaics on the roof of a building, save 3 tons of carbon over the life of the project, in today's dollars, that's worth $41.68 per ton, per metric ton in that particular case. And of course, it's based on human health impacts and, damage to the ecosystem, things like that. So just a quick case study here of where we use this kind of thing. So Prologis is one of the world's biggest logistics companies. So if you buy stuff from Amazon.com as an example, it's probably gone through Prologis warehouses. They're a worldwide company, very big in terms of sustainability. And so they've used our Autocase for buildings to analyze one of their warehouses here. This is in Tracy, California. And they build sustainable LEED certified buildings. And this is the example of the results of the business case for having built a sustainable warehouse instead of a typical warehouse. Looking at this graphic here, you can see the real financial impact to Prologis in the sort of the third box. There was a real financial benefits to Prologis. Then in the second box, you can see that there's tenant benefits, things like improved environmental quality, indoor environmental quality, I should say, electricity cost savings, things like that. And then in the top box, the green box that says social and environmental, you can see the value of those externalities, things like the reduction in criteria air contaminants or air pollution, greenhouse gases, flood risk reduction, heat stress mortality reduction from greenery around the building, things like that. So, and at the bottommost table, you can see that that's the total value of each of those 3 stakeholder groups, and then the total triple bottom line of the investment in additional investment in sustainability beyond the California Building Code of $1.6 million over the life of the project. And those are all present value. So that's saying essentially that society, including the environment, financial implications, everything, is better off for this investment by $1.6 million. So it's a business case considering everything on an apples-to-apples basis in dollars for sustainability investments in this particular facility. So that's an example from Autocase for buildings. And we'll move to the next slide. So we've used this type of analysis with all kinds of different clients throughout North America. Here's an example of some of the nice logos, makes for a pretty slide. By the way, I should mention both Autocase for building and Autocase for green infrastructure right now are in a free beta period till the end of the year. And I realize the end of the year is almost here and it's Christmas time and all that. We have been in free beta for 3 months. Obviously, that means that the software will cost money as of January 1st, but you do have the chance to go in even right now or after this webinar to try both products for free till the end of the year. So I do want to encourage that as well. In terms of the next segment, I'm going to move to Lydia's slide here in a minute, and I'll give a little introduction to Lydia. So Lydia is one of our clients. They do have the software as well as a consulting client. They are a long-standing consultant client. She works for Dewberry, I should say. She's the head of sustainability for Dewberry, and which is quite a large architecture firm based in I guess it's Alexandria, Virginia, but anyway, Washington, D.C. suburbs. And she's going to cover some slides talking primarily about the kind of consulting work we've done in the past, which is some of the stuff that led to the software version. So I'll pass the control. Actually, I'll control her slides, but I'll move on to her slides right now. And Lydia, you're up for your segment. There we go.
Well, great. Thank you, Steph, for inviting me, first of all. And I, like Steph mentioned, I'm Lydia Berger, and I am with Dewberry. We're an architectural engineering firm, about 2,000 people, with multiple locations, but headquartered in Fairfax, Virginia. So the reason I was invited is to present just my experience with sustainable return on investment, but also to talk a little bit more about this specific project, which is actually on Dewberry headquarter renovation. And it's not only a case study, but it was also used to beta test development of Autocase for buildings. So next slide. So like Seth mentioned, a little bit of history. I have been involved with sustainable return on investment analysis for over a decade now. So I truly have a firsthand experience how automation of this process benefits our industry. This slide here really presents a little bit of a history of how we arrived with Autocase. 10 years ago, and we start using this process, just sort of developing this analysis by hand. So left top corner is actually a spreadsheet that comes from one of our projects that look at both the benefits of sustainable ROI as well as financial ROI. And now through Autocase, again, the process is very similar, and the results are very similar. They give us this kind of a clear representation of financial and non-financial benefits. So you can see it on the right-hand side, lower corner. That's actually a result from one of the various projects where we look at the financial benefits of that project in revenue generation, but also looking at things related to non-financial benefits that are monetized, like water quality and habitat enhancement or recreational values. And the next one. So now jumping a little bit into my specific case study, you know, when you talk about sustainability, there are obviously a variety of tools that are currently available to measure and determine sustainability on the project. They're not all equal. They kind of are used for various purposes. You know, on this project, you can see we kind of listed several things that we're tracking, one of which is LEED for commercial interiors, as well as sustainable return on investment. But here, for the first time, this project is actually registered with LEED pilot credit that looks at sustainable ROI. So for the first time, we're kind of tracking this in parallel, LEED and S-ROI together. And we'll talk a little bit more about what it means, and I know that Steph is going to get into the discussion of the pilot credit a little bit more during this presentation. So let's jump to the next slide then. So this is kind of the why factor, I guess, why are we doing this? I mean, specifically for Dewberry, we employed sustainable return on investment analysis to prove to the owners the benefits of investing in sustainability, and really wanted to show or have the ability to show tangible benefits related to sustainability. From the macro level, just like on any other project, we kind of structure it around some specific goals that were related to water and energy efficiency strategies, construction waste, and indoor air quality. And those, as you obviously see, those parallel nicely also with variety of LEED strategies. So next slide. We also, as consultants, we also know that introducing sort of a new process and fairly complex concept, it can be overwhelming to the team. So I was trying to develop these graphic representations and the diagrams that represent this process. And to better understand this economic valuation and what kind of goes into it, the area that's circled here kind of shows the breakdown between the incremental effects of what we measure. So specifically under our overarching energy efficiency strategies, we look not only at electricity savings and natural gas savings, but we're also tracking and monetizing the benefits of reduced greenhouse gas emission reduction, as well as reduced criteria or contaminants. Our baseline is a code-compliant building, but in this process, we're showing the benefits of going above code compliance, as well as meeting specific LEED goals for our project. So what this slide here shows that every step of the way, we actually juxtaposing this process, S-ROI process, to the relevant LEED credits. So these results here actually talk about energy efficiency results, and they show not only the dollar value of from electricity saved at $670,000 over the life cycle, as well as predicted lighting power reduction. But also, as you can see here, they show the monetized value of things like greenhouse gas emission reduction and criteria or contaminants reduction. These are all zip code specific, so the same very building, the same very renovation in a different region would obviously show slightly different results. And the next slide. So I know we don't have time to go over all results and benefits because of the time constraints, and I just kind of give you samples of energy efficiency. This was an interesting one because it shows the monetized value of benefits from indoor environmental quality strategies. And you can see there are things related to monetized value of, for example, increased productivity due to increased comfort. This is a really nice way of showing, as Steph mentioned, apples to apples, where we see the financial investments we had to make in order to create a better working environment against monetized non-financial benefits of things like increased productivity, for example. And the next slide. So as I mentioned, this project is registered to achieve LEED for commercial interiors, and it's also registered, I think it was the very first project to register under the lead pilot credit, SSPC 113, which is titled Informing Design Using Triple Bottom Line Analysis. And with that, I'm going to transfer it back to Steph.
Thanks, Lydia.
Hey,
Sure.
hey, Steph, it's Jim. Hey,
Yep.
Steph, it's Jim. I just want to cut in for one quick second while you're transitioning here and just let the audience know that if they do want to ask questions, and encourage them to do so, to please use the chat feature and just send your question to staff, and we'll ask those questions at the end. Great.
Okay, great.
Back to you.
Thanks. So as I mentioned earlier, there's two current modules of Autocase. One of them is specific for buildings, green building analysis, similar to what Lydia just discussed, and the other one's for green infrastructure. And literally, I'll demo both and I'll talk about both individually, but let's start with Autocase for buildings. So right now, it's specifically designed to analyze the pilot credit Lydia referred to. So this is a brand new pilot credit authorized by the USGBC to do triple bottom line analysis. And of course, S-ROI would qualify as triple bottom line analysis. We are actually in the process of working with the USGBC to increase that to 7 pilot credits related to economics, which would result in 7 additional points. And some people might be familiar that the difference between, say, certified and silver or silver and gold is only 10 points. So you can see there's a lot of points at stake here as economics becomes more widespread within USGBC. Other rating systems, including ISI Envision as an example, BREEAM and others, are also looking at adding economic analysis to their points system. Autocase for Green Infrastructure is specifically designed to look at projects that build with nature. So it's not green as in any kind of sustainable infrastructure, but green as in green roofs, bioswales, detention ponds, those kinds of things. It also does look at things like permeable pavement versus impervious pavement, that kind of thing. So that's just an overview of both of them. So let's talk about Autocase for buildings specifically. Why did we go and create an Autocase for buildings? Well, most importantly, we wanted to quantify the externalities associated with the lead credit. So when you'll see when we go into it that it's actually built by lead credit. So if you get a lead credit for renewable energy or optimized energy efficiency or indoor water use reduction, we're literally quantifying the benefits of doing that, of investing in it versus the benefits of getting it, which is, there's lots of demand for that. We're also cost justifying, if you will, higher levels of certification. Now, it doesn't always do that. It certainly doesn't greenwash. But for instance, it could help for the business case of saying, why shouldn't we build LEED gold instead of silver, or building to LEED certification at all? We've done that many times all across North America for individual clients, and now you can do it with the software. And the third reason, of course, is it specifically responds to the requirements of that LEED pilot credit and the additional 6 that should be coming online that we talked about earlier. So it meets that need. The pilot credit, because some people might be asking, what the heck are they talking about? When you get a copy of the presentation, or if you want to look it up, there's a link that's brand new. It was announced at Greenbuild that just occurred in Los Angeles. There's some information here that some of it I've already covered. You can read it yourself. But essentially, it's to do the economic analysis that we, as well as EarthShift, do, and certainly that Autocase for buildings does as well. Going to the next slide. Here's the these are what you need to provide to get that credit. It's actually quite simple. The main factors are really those 3 ABC above, which is the net present value of the financial impacts, the net present value of the environmental and social impacts combined, and then the net present value of the triple bottom line. It's exactly what we've been talking about all along. And then the rest of the stuff is really some background, how you did it, sources, provide your model or the software report that Autocase produces automatically as an example. So we're, this is just happening now. So far, USGBC is telling us there's a great deal of interest and people registering for this new pilot credit, which is pretty cool. This is a screenshot, but I'm going to actually move right into the software Autocase for Buildings right now, and then we'll come back to the PowerPoint. So Autocase is, I'm going to Google Chrome, by the way. So Autocase, if you go to autocase.com, this is the website you would see. I'll just quickly scroll around it. Our 2 products, blah, blah, blah. There's some videos on there and things like that. But once you're in, log in and all that, and once again, this free beta period right now, this would be your dashboard of projects that you might choose to create. So I'm going to click on it's not a real project. It's actually a real project that Lydia and I worked on at one point, but this is all fake results, just so you know, just for demonstration purposes alone. So this is what it looks like after you've created the project. There's a few things to enter, of course. Most importantly is your location. So this is in El Paso, Texas. All the factors pretty much in the software are locationally specific. So the electrical grid makeup in El Paso, the climate, the precipitation, all these things are local to El Paso, how they value water, which has a much higher value in El Paso than, say, in northern Canada, based on scarcity and usage. So as you can see, if those familiar with LEED, these are your major credit categories and then your individual credits. So for energy and atmosphere is a major credit category, indoor environmental quality, a major credit category, and then there's different credits underneath. So, and at the top here, there's actually 3, the pilot credit requires 3 core credits, so that's what that's telling you, and you have to analyze at least 6 credits. Here's the value, total value of your social and environmental impact on your project. So let's go into optimized energy. So you can see there's a few questions that need to be answered. There's not really that many. You know, how much kilowatt hours of electricity is being saved? Capital costs you can either put in your own or the software will estimate it. You can even do a very detailed life cycle cost analysis if you want. These are some of the outputs of the automatic estimate in the software for your cost. If you want to figure out what is being done with this information, well, there's guidance, of course, on what's being calculated, how it's being calculated, etc. Reference documents to identify where this information comes from in terms of social values, things like that. You save your information and bring it back to the main project by going back. And then, so green, by the way, indicates that these things have been filled out. So I'm actually just going to jump right now to results. And then this is the results page you end up with. Obviously, it's going into commercial mode in January. Right now, this is still the beta. There's a few tweaks that will occur. But you can see the life cycle financial value, which in this case is the present value of the life cycle cost of these additional investments in sustainability were $600,000. But there was $5.1 million of social environmental benefit and a net triple bottom line, which is the difference between the two, of $4.4 million. Where does that come from? Well, there's a waterfall diagram that shows the buildup. It also shows the split by stakeholders. So, you know, there was incremental capital costs of $1.2 million, but different benefits of those investments split between owner, occupant, community, and then you get your triple bottom line value. So, and then you can hit this PDF to export the results, and that's actually the report you need to provide to get the pilot credit. Once again, this is in beta. We're working on improvements to it. Here's a PDF instantly produced. And by the way, I don't know if you noticed, but when I ran it, it ran literally in seconds. And if you make a change, it literally runs again in seconds. So it's very easy to use, quick to use, operates quite rapidly. So let me go back to the PowerPoint so I can cover the green infrastructure software. So why do we develop green infrastructure? Well, it was really about quantifying the externalities of building with nature. So green infrastructure is becoming more popular, but the traditional way to build things is with cement and pipes when you're talking about stormwater as an example. Yet there's a lot of public benefits that are realized if you do build, especially stormwater infrastructure, in a green, with nature manner. And because the capital investments are typically small, you would not be in a situation where where you'd want to pay a consultant typically to analyze a green infrastructure project. That's one of the reasons we went to green infrastructure, so that we could democratize this kind of analysis by making it inexpensive and easy to use. Once again, when you're comparing your traditional, this is the way we've always done it, versus things like green roofs and permeable pavement, it's helpful to cost justify these things with a cost-benefit analysis or S-ROI, and this facilitates that. And finally, the software does not greenwash things. So for instance, if you're in once again, I'll say northern Canada, where water is scarce, it has a low social value of water. Or you're in an area like the Pacific Northwest, where electricity is produced generally, mostly free of carbon and criteria contaminants because it's largely hydroelectric power, then it's gonna show lower public benefits in that area than you would if you're in, say, Virginia, where it's mostly coal, as an example. Here's just a screen capture from Autocase for Green Infrastructure. Now I'll move to the software itself. Once again, going into Google Chrome. So I'm actually in a project here. I'll go to my dashboard first here. So, each one of these is a different project. So I'm going to open a real world project. Actually, I'm going to show you, before I even do that, to put a bit of context. So this is a project, real world project. It's a site in St. Paul, Minnesota, one of the Twin Cities, where there was an old brownfield site, 120 acres roughly, and Bar Engineering did the stormwater program management for the site, and they used Autocase to compare sort of a baseline scenario versus a greener scenario, which they called centralized. And you can see this graphic, which is straight from the report that went to the city, the green, by the way, are your environmental and social factors. So they actually quantified versus the dollars of construction costs and O&M, different benefits like, the value of saving water, recreational value, flood risk reduction, air pollution, things like that, and actually use it for decision-making purposes. So now I'm going to bring you to that project in the software. So let's go here. There's different projects under that overall project. You can see the map is in St. Paul, the centralized option. So it looks a little different. Part of the reason that it looks different versus buildings is because buildings is our new product, and we put more effort into making it look pretty. We're going to be doing that with green infrastructure as well. But you can see that there's, once again, a fair number of inputs you have to enter, but really it's mostly default driven. You just keep hitting next, and it will bring you to different elements that you can fill out or not necessarily fill out. Design components are what are you actually building? So this particular project had a variety of different components. One of them, for instance, was bioretention. So I'll click on the edit button there. And you can see, there's various inputs. Almost all of them have defaults. So, the area was 4.83 acres of bioretention. By the way, if you have questions about any of these things, there's little question marks that provide information about what these things are. So let me go to maximum ponding depth and hover over it, or click on it, sorry. Information pops up about what it is. But in this particular case, it's the default of 18 inches, but you can change it if you know more valuable information. Similarly for capital expenditures, right now they put in a specific number, but they could have used the software estimate by turning on estimate here. Let's see, let me move to additional input. If you have questions about, some of these things like the discount rate used to produce a present value as an example, and you can see in this particular case, the software's default value is 7%, which is identified as the federal government default rate for cost-benefit analysis studies, but they overrode it with the city of St. Paul's discount rate, which was 4%. But if you want to know more about it, once again, click on the question mark, and you can see there's underlying information. So if you want to know about how the software calculates discount rate, you can click there. It opens up a new tab, and there's information here from all our documentation. If you go to the top one and you want to know why the federal government uses 7% for their discount rate, you can open that, and it will open up the Office of Management and Budget report, hopefully it's being a bit slow right now, from the White House that identifies why they use 7% discount rate. Well, it's not loading up very quickly right now. I'm going to blame that on the government website. Oh, there we go, slowly coming in. Yeah, so here's the document that outlines what discount rates use for the federal government. So as an example, and there's all kinds of different information. So if you want to know, how we value carbon, it's the same thing. There's information there, documentation on it. But similarly, when you want to produce results, hit run report. In this case, it opens up a list of all the inputs you use, defaults and overrides for all the different elements. You hit run, and you'll see that it runs in real time, very quickly, literally taking seconds. In this case, it produces a quick executive summary. There's a whole variety of project results in here, including identify the different benefit categories. There's, once again, question marks if you wanted to learn more about it. All kinds of different inputs in here, quantities of carbon and different types of air pollution, stormwater diverted and infiltration information. And I'll keep going through here, but the life cycle analysis results, probability curves, which are cumulative probability curves. They're actually interactive if you want to turn one off or another. This, by the way, represents the full range of possible results. Split of stakeholder groups, who benefits, as in community versus the environment, and even Envision, if people aren't familiar with Envision, and I split it up into the different Envision categories, the major credit categories. And by the way, it's been endorsed by, Autocase has been recommended by ISI as well as a tool for Envision. And there's even more detailed results in the different categories as well. So actually, let me show you, jump to, let's go, not that one, that's new, I just did that one. Board site, oh yeah, here's another example of a project that used Autocase. So here, for the city of San Francisco, they looked at adding about 1.5 million square feet to a neighborhood in San Francisco of green roof. So the city investing in a whole bunch of green roof space in a portion of San Francisco called South of Market. And here's, once again, the kind of results that are produced. So you can see financial results versus social and environmental results. So things like water quality improvements from reduced runoff from a green roof as compared to a traditional roof is one of the key benefits. Property value uplift as well. Flood risk reduction, once again, because the green roofs retain water as opposed to runoff into the street. So this is another example of a project done by Green Infrastructure. So if I move back to the PowerPoint and we jump to the next slide here, these are pricing options. So essentially, there's, I'll give a quick overview, but the main point is the middle one. A typical license of either Autocase for Green Infrastructure or Autocase for Building is $1,000 or $995 for a 1-year license. Okay. There is a quick start version that really only allows you to run one project, so it's quite limited. And then there's a premium version that allows you to run an unlimited number of projects, but more importantly, it includes both building and green infrastructure as well as some consulting help. So 5 hours a month of our Masters in Economics employees will literally help you run analysis for even billable projects or your own lead submissions or whatever. We would literally help you learn to use and actually use and do quality assurance on your project, all that kind of stuff. That's the premium version of the software. But most people, since it's relatively easy to use, should just need the standard version, which, that lasts for a year. So some concluding thoughts that I wanted to bring forth here. Why did Impact Infrastructure create Autocase? Well, it's mostly because we wanted to promote sustainability and democratize the kind of in-depth analysis that was being done on a consulting basis, essentially. So there's a few things I have here. So making a case for sustainability is obviously one of the key things we're doing. Let the dollars do the talking, which means by putting environmental and social factors on an equal footing, or at least measured in the same terms as financial impact, they can be more readily considered in the business case. It's easier to defend an additional investment by saying, there's a return of X dollars to society than by just saying, well, it helps with water quality or it's good for the environment. Next, we've got the software makes that kind of analysis easy and affordable. I mean, that's the key reason why you automate these things. And then another final very important factor is Impact Infrastructure and Autocase are trying to standardize and make more projects comparable. So if they use a common methodology, common values for environmental and social factors, they're much more easily comparable. So for instance, cities and counties have leaned on us to help prioritize investments based on their capital improvement plan, as has the Department of Defense as an example, because it can make different kinds of projects directly comparable. So I think that is the end of the formal part of the slides here. I did want to mention, especially if you get a copy of the PowerPoint, there is more information about the LEED pilot credit, which we talked about earlier. I do recommend that you go to the Autocase website, register. This is a cloud-based software, so you don't even have to download anything. You just register. You can access it on an iPad if you want. It's always going to be cloud-based and readily available. It has another advantage of being able to be updated automatically. So as, for instance, the social cost of carbon changes, the software automatically updates with that kind of information. So that's one of the key advantages. And maybe one last thing, because I meant to show it, but I didn't yet, is here's another example. This is done with Autocase for buildings for the new San Francisco Airport Boarding Area B expansion. You can see that we've compared some different investments in sustainability from their financial perspective as well as social environmental perspective, and produced your sustainable net present value or triple bottom line to prioritize different types of investment in sustainability for this expansion of Boarding Area B. So I think I'm going to end it off there and pass it back to Jim and see if he wants to, if there's any questions.
That's perfect, Steph. Thank you. That just on the right amount of time. So we do have a lot of questions, and so we'll get through as many as we can. But just so you can catch your breath and take a sip of water. The first question I have is actually for Lydia, and it's really about, this great example of how you convinced the ownership of your organization to move forward on the project. But one question that came in here was with regard to whether Dewberry also saw this as an external marketing opportunity for the company as well, and whether that factored into the decision-making process.
Yeah, that's a good question. Maybe I think the simple answer is yes, but I think the biggest benefit that we see it's really from retention recruitment perspective. So having a better building and obviously being able to kind of talk about and communicate it to our employees is probably as important as the ability to communicate that to the ownership. That's sort of one thing, but since we've been going through the renovation, we had several clients walking through the space, and so they were quite impressed. So because of that, there were also benefits in that external marketing, kind of that self-marketing that we like to do.
Sure. Great. So this question really for why don't you start with it, Lydia, and then Steph, you can jump in as well. And it really has to do with how you measure some of the increased productivity from the design work and really the changes from a design perspective.
Okay, so I'll start, and I'll let Steph to add to this. So first of all, in this whole process, when you kind of saw some of my slides, that first of all, we kind of went through the process of determining what we're going to measure and what goes into the quote-unquote indoor environmental category and benefits. And just because we so closely paralleling our LEED for interior renovation process, we actually used, as an outline, we used the IEQ credits. So we took the whole host of credits that were related to environmental quality, off-gassing, as well as things that are related to things such as better access to natural light, controllability of systems, and how the whole floor plate was designed to kind of allow or maximize employees' access to natural light and views. So that was a strategy set forth, and then based on a lot of the lead credits that we're tracking currently, and then we use S-ROI analysis to actually to be able to give us the ability to put some financial or monetize value of those non-tangible benefits and communicate those to our employees and clients. So, and I'll let Steph to explain a little bit, how specifically you measure aspects of productivity using S-ROI.
Yeah, sure. So I think my screen's still being shown. So I was actually flipping through some stuff in Autocase for Buildings that helps explain that, which I'll touch on as well right now. So you can see that there's 6 indoor environmental quality credits here, and those do affect productivity. So I just went to daylighting as an example. So things like improved daylighting or thermal comfort as an example, maybe I'll jump to that one too, provide improved productivity. There's studies that have proven that employees that are more comfortable and have more daylighting, et cetera, are more productive. So when you go into one of these credits, and thermal comfort's not one that's filled out here, you can see that there's, right off the bat, you've got the input tabs, but you've got the purpose. So there's an explanation as to, what are you analyzing here with thermal comfort. But then you go under impact, and you can see that there's pretty detailed documentation about the impact. That was health at first, and now it's productivity. So you can see that there's different information about how, and in this case, Lawrence Berkeley Labs, for instance, how productivity is impacted by things like thermal comfort and daylighting. So the information is there, and if you go under references, you can see the actual documentation that was used to provide the higher productivity impact related to these individual credits.
Oh, great. So this is a somewhat related question, but goes maybe a little bit further in that talking about, can you clarify really what's defined as a social, defined in social benefits?
Yeah, so social benefits, well, first of all, I'll maybe complicate things a little bit by saying both the environmental and social impacts are measured by their social value. So that's a little bit of a confusion thing, but what differentiates an environmental impact versus a social impact are really that environment. It's a little bit of a gray area, but environmental factors are directly related, obviously, to things like improved water quality or greenhouse gases or pollution, stuff that directly impacts the environment. Those are actually measured as the social value of greenhouse gases or social value of water. So there's a bit of confusion there. But in terms of things that are social impacts, they're things that really don't affect the environment but affect people directly. So that's things like health and safety, obviously productivity we just talked about earlier. So it's those type of elements that are considered social versus environmental. Some things there is arguably a little bit of an overlap for, but I know there's a lot of confusion about, because even environmental factors are measured by their social value, that there's typically a little bit of confusion in that area.
Sure. So I think delving a little bit more into the actual software at this time, this question asks really about, is there a way to kind of track changes and or I guess at the same time see an audit trail of when those changes were made in your software?
That's a really good question. I'm going to assume that the question refers to, actually I'll answer it two ways. One of them refers to changes that we make on the server ourselves, for instance, a change in the social value of carbon as an example, versus a change made by the user. And this is an area where we probably need to improve a little bit in both cases. For the user, so for instance, if you make your own change, update something like your own estimate of the capital cost or the water saved or something like that, there isn't really a paper trail automatically produced by the software. That's, to be honest, we haven't really given that too much thought so far, because we just figured you'd just keep it as a different run, if you will, or because the software runs so quickly, you just toggle it on and off, whatever the change is. But I can see why a paper trail might be useful for user input. In terms of changes made by us automatically when something changes in terms of methodology or source values, that is identified to the user every time it happens. So when we do make a change to the software, by the way, it comes out, of course, in releases, right? So it's not like we're going to change one little thing and it goes out. It's, you know, every month or whatever, there might be a release with a whole bunch of things being updated. That is passed on to the user. And even though we're not doing it now, it's something we're definitely looking at doing, is that it would automatically save a previous version run with the pre-change version, if you will. So that's not yet in the software, but it's something we're considering doing.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So this is a little bit trickier question, maybe, in a way, but it does sort of drive into the use of the tool and kind of how it gets leveraged, and really talking about, can you use the software to assess, in this case specifically, farm buildings or infrastructure? And the example is, you know, if a farmer wants to build an anaerobic digester, for instance, can you use the software to kind of quantify, obviously, the triple bottom line of that investment?
The simple answer is the software is not designed to do that right now. That would be something, for instance, that we would add in an upcoming module of that, you know, maybe focuses on energy as an example, or you know, another thing that we've done a fair amount for anaerobic digesters is like wastewater treatment plants. So we are considering a module that would be for water, which analyzes, you know, drinking water as well as wastewater, which would have something like that in it. But you know, without going into too many details, I would say it might be possible to analyze the impact using Autocase for building, or even GI, if you kind of worked around the UI, in other words, saying that there was so much energy savings and the value of that energy savings as an example. So, you know, where it says optimize energy performance, you know, maybe if you put in the cost of the anaerobic digester and the, you know, O&M impacts, and then you identify the energy savings. So there could be a way to sort of work around it, but right now neither module is designed to do that specifically.
Okay, but maybe if you got creative, you could come up with some things.
Yeah, and that's the other thing, is that we do have a bunch of really smart people in the company that are very eager to help our clients, and so we could even help, you know, with a workaround.
Yeah, and I think also, Steph, that's an area where EarthShift Global and our 3 pillars application could potentially assist in that area as well.
Yeah, that's a good point, and a little plug for the upcoming webinar for 3 pillars
right.
is that
right.
The 3 pillar software, as opposed to Autocase, is more open-ended. It's much more open-ended for analyzing a variety of things, whereas Autocase, and that's one of the reasons we're such good partners, EarthShift and Impact Infrastructure, is our focus is on making very specific software that's designed for a specific purpose, whereas 3 pillars is very flexible. So.
Yep. Agreed. So next question is kind of more of a, I guess, more of a market question, which is talking about, first off, they thought that the presentation was great, but they wanted to know, you know, in terms of the interest in the market perspective, from a green infrastructure, is that coming more, you see, from private industry, or is it more from government?
I would say it's a really interesting question, and I'll answer it based on the experience that we're seeing for the green infrastructure specifically, and then maybe I'll answer differently for buildings because they're somewhat different. So for green infrastructure, we're finding the interest is coming from governments, so local governments City of St. Paul, City of Los Angeles, people like that, City of San Francisco, because ultimately they're responsible for stormwater and things like that.
Sure.
The purchasers of the software, though, and our primary target market for the software is actually the architecture and engineering community, who would be doing the design work for these projects. So we have sold green infrastructure licenses to owners as well as architecture and engineering firms, but our primary market is the architecture and engineering firms. Demand clearly coming from local government, counties and cities. For buildings, it's different. The demand there is, and it's quite potent, is actually coming from the green rating agencies, or more specifically U.S. Green Buildings Council, which is extremely supportive of adding this kind of analysis to their green building rating system. And so then you've got a situation where the owners obviously would like to get some other points in an easy and financially efficient way. And you've got architecture firms or lead firms that specialize in lead consulting that are very interested in the software as a way to promote lead and to get those, better designed buildings, more sustainable buildings, more certified buildings in general. So it's kind of a different market driving in both cases, but certainly for buildings especially, which has not even gone commercial yet. The beta was released, that you're looking at now, was released at the beginning of October. It goes commercial in January. We've had really very impressive demand and interest in it already. Very happy with that.
Great. So this is another question that kind of actually leads on the farming question, if you will, but talks about, will the software be expanded to include things other than buildings, I should say, and infrastructure in the future, such as products? Get your thoughts. Obviously, I think from our perspective, that's kind of where Three Pillars fills in, is it having a little bit broader, as you said, context, but certainly get your thoughts on that as well, Steph.
So we absolutely will be adding modules. There's no question about that. That's a key part of our business strategy. However, I would say product is not necessarily in our near-term plans. I did mention already one for water as an example. We have several and have had a great number of water consulting clients in the past and currently right now as well. And so we see a pretty key need for water and wastewater type investments, things like biogas and liquid stream, sludge management, and all kinds of stuff that they, renewable energy production with the biogas, that kind of stuff. So that's probably going to be our next major module, I would expect. Beyond that, though, we haven't really identified anything beyond the fact that we'd like to cover all or most horizontal and vertical infrastructure, transit, things like that, energy, etc. I would say, as you go a little bit further into the future, we might consider product or residential applications as an example. But I wouldn't say those are coming anytime soon, those two.
Sure. Well, we are just over the top of the hour here, so I'll ask one more question, let people move on with the rest of their day. And it's a kind of interesting question, and it really talks more to the accounting side of things, which is, how are embodied energy and carbon, from water treatment, distribution, how are they accounted for, and really how are they not double counted?
Yep. So if you look at indoor water use as an example, and you look at the guidance and resource information at the top, you can look at impacts, for instance, and you can see that carbon emissions and air pollution are considered in outdoor and in indoor water use related to the impacts of pumping and treatment of water. So that's actually absolutely part of the that sort of life cycle impact on carbon, and criteria air contaminants are considered in the water valuation essence, not just the value of leaving water in its natural state or not using up water, but the value of not having to treat it and not having to pump it. So that is included.
Okay, great. And actually, that I guess leads into the. I'm going to contradict myself and say there is one more question, and that is, you have all this data in the tool. Are there databases that need to be purchased, or is it all embedded as part of the tool?
No, everything is part of the tool, and the references and source values and all that is included in, including sample calculations, all included in both products.
Okay, great. So I'm going to quickly take back control here and just do a final plug and thank you and Lydia, Steph, for taking the time today to bring us through Autocase and show us some great case studies. That's been fantastic. And I just want to, again, make a little bit of a plug here for an upcoming webinar next, the final webinar in our S-ROI series here. Here we're going to talk about 3 pillars and really that general purpose S-ROI tool and kind of get into that aspect of it. We've already got a lot of folks signed up, but please, if you're interested, the webinar is coming up on January 12th at 1 p.m. And we look forward to hearing from you and getting your questions and what have you. So once again, thanks everyone for attending today. Thanks Steph and Lydia for your time. And this will be recorded and will be something you can view at a later date or certainly share with your colleagues, etc. So thank you for taking the time.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right. Take care.
Cheers.
Bye.
Okay.